So I am going to start the recording right now. And what I'd love to do is just along the top after me, so to my right, I see Ian. We'll just keep on going along and get everyone just to do a quick introduction of who you are, where you're from, and then we'll start again more of the stories and maybe the challenges. But let's just do a quick intro of everybody. So I'm Carla with Edge and project manager of Embracing the Spirit.
Hi, Carla. I'm Ian, and I'm in Hamilton, in downtown Hamilton at New Vision United.
Great. Kendra?
Hey, so I'm Kendra. I'm with Trinity St. Paul Center for Faith, Justice, and the Arts in downtown Toronto, along with Catholic Music and a bunch of other arts organizations. And I'm also an advisor with Faith and the Commons.
Deborah?
Hi, my name's Deborah Handley. I'm in Mission, BC, where I'm with a small United church there, St. Andrew's United.
Wonderful. Welcome. Michelle? Michelle from Leaside. Okay.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm from Toronto. I'm a webmaster. My faith community is Leaside United Church.
Great. Cameron?
Hi, I'm Cam Fraser. I'm in Regina, Saskatchewan at Knox Metropolitan United Church in the downtown of that city.
Wow, this actually might be the most diverse group of people we've had so far. I'm so excited. Sandy?
Sandy Howell. I'm with Crescent Fort Rouge United in Winnipeg.
John, I see you up there.
Hi, John Ryerson with Fairlawn Avenue United, and also Presbytery, involved heavily in social justice and other ways of getting churches used differently.
Great, thanks, John. And I know that there's two other people who I can't see your names. If can anyone else on the line please introduce yourself? Welcome.
Hi, I'm Jim Keenan from Bradford United Church. Sorry, I'm traveling in my car, so this was the best I could do to get in. And we working hard creating a collaborative arts center there with members of the community, the larger community and the church community.
Wow, great, thank you. And is there anyone else on the line? Okay. I saw Inferno, so I don't know what that is, but that's okay. So why don't we start kind of jumping in? I'd love to get the story of everyone on the phone of where you're at. And what might be really cool is to say your story and maybe end with maybe your biggest challenge that you have right now. Because I think what's really neat about everyone who's here is we're all at different stages. We might be doing things slightly differently, but it would be really neat to maybe do some peer help. Like if there's a challenge, maybe one of us actually has a way that we've already addressed that challenge. So I'm going to invite everyone now to think about your story, tell it, and then maybe what's the biggest challenge that you're facing at this point. So Ian, did you want to go first? Because you got you to introduce yourself first. Did we lose Ian? Okay, yeah. Then we're going to jump.
There we go. Technical difficulties. I'm here.
Oh, there he is. Okay.
So, is my picture showing up, or is it just my voice at this point? Because
it should be both at this point.
Okay, good. All right. Well, New Vision United Church is, as I step back and look at it as it is developing at this point, I would say that we started out as an amalgamation of two congregations, pretty much past their date stamp, and then we came to the realization that we really weren't an amalgamation. We were a new congregation with a couple of properties that are our inheritance from these former congregations, St. Giles and Centenary. And so with a handful of people and some urban core property, we got to work to kind of carve out an identity for ourselves and to repurpose and redevelop the properties that we had, kind of a brownfield concept of church development. So
just to interrupt really quickly, Jim, can I get you to mute your phone?
Oh, sure. Sorry.
Thank you.
So, so we started out working on a redevelopment for purpose-built rental housing on one of our two sites, the St. Giles site. And as we were doing that, the city and its music industry came to us and said, you know, you have this 1,200-seat sanctuary at your other site right in the urban core, and you know, to fill in a few of the gaps. There used to be up to 17 mid-sized venues in Hamilton, but they are all gone now because of well, demolition and decay and that sort of stuff. So we need a venue that size in the city, and do you want to work with us on that? Well, it seemed like a pretty good idea. And of course, it was pretty nice to have somebody come to us and say, hey, we think that you have something that we can use in the city. So that's the launch point. And from there, I could fill in details in terms of how we've sort of moved into that and where we are in the development of it. But I think I'll stop there and let others, you know, tell parts, you know, introduce their stories, and then we can go from there. You asked me for a challenge. Yeah, the challenge. The challenge is the business case that will warrant financing donations upwards of $2 to $3 million to bring this into the kind of space that we want it to be in, so that it succeeds. You know, it starts at a scale and at an audience experience level that people are going to really appreciate. So, you know, in comparison to a new built, you know, purpose-built live music venue in that neighborhood of size, it's pretty cheap. So, you know, I think there's a lot of motivation, but then there are complications because we're a church.
Right, and you've been navigating all of that, so we can definitely dig into that a bit more. Thank you. So just a reminder, if you aren't speaking, to mute your speakers. It's just going to make our sound quality that much better for everyone. So Ian was talking about how this basically, he's using the sanctuary as a center for the arts and seeing that niche there. Anyone have a similar story or that they'd like to introduce themselves as, or to talk about a little bit further? Kendra?
I was just sitting back to see if somebody else would speak first, Carla. Hey, Ian, it's good to see you again, by the way. So Trinity St. Paul's, I imagine you guys know, defines itself as Trinity St. Paul's United Church and Center for Faith, Justice, and the Arts. So we have 14 resident companies, mostly professional arts companies, and then another, in the past year, 483 user groups, of whom about 70% are arts-based, from small-scale kids' dance classes all the way to Massey Hall Presents and Tanya Tagak and Feist Tours and things like that. So that's Trinity St. Paul's, but I'm also seeing different scaled things in all of my work with Faith in the Common Good. So I've been working with Spire of Sydenham in Kingston, who's doing phenomenal things and sharing their space with community to help particularly a film festival that's localized there, along with a lot of choirs in Kingston. And then similarly in Ottawa, Dominion Chalmers United Church has entered into a relationship with the University of Carleton, where the University of Carleton's music department will become resident there, but Dominion Chalmers will remain resident as well. So there's a ton of different models, I think, that are of interest, and people are doing some really cool things right now. The challenge for me at Trinity St. Paul's right now is actually a growing congregation. So we brought on the Reverend Sherry DeNovo in January, and she has brought a great and sudden renewal. And so, you know, we're seeing 40, 50, 60 new people each Sunday and requests for membership that are 15, 16, 17 people a month where we would have seen one before. And that, interestingly, is a challenge for us because it's not something we faced before. And so there'll have to be some redressing of space, and how exactly we're going to manage all of our user groups and a growing congregation is a question at the moment, really.
So that's a really probably common challenge, I think, for that everyone's thinking about, but it's kind of interesting to see it at your scale, right? So it's so big. Awesome. And please, if you guys have questions for Ian or Kendra, and as people introduce themselves, we don't have to wait until the end. This is supposed to be a conversation, so please feel free to jump in. I think the next person, Deborah, did you want to tell your story and where you guys are at?
I'll give you a little bit. I apologize for the blank screen. I'm hiding from the world. Sorry. We find ourselves in a similar situation as many small community united churches, where we entered into a relationship with a nearby united church as we are now a 2-point charge. And we're navigating all of that relationship. But we also lost our building and are in interim space. And so we're beginning to, or trying to envision where we can be and who we are going to be and what we're going to be and how we're going to do all of that. So we have a trust fund of a significant chunk of cash that we get to dream with, but it's where are we going to go? And so my community is interested in the whole sort of relationship between faith and the arts, and that's an area that they've asked me to explore. So that's where I am. And this came up, so here we are. A perfect
so lots of moving parts.
Sort of
so you're
place
looking
to begin.
for some time.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cameron?
Yeah, I've just put my earphones on. Can you still hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm at Knox Metropolitan, downtown Regina, Saskatchewan. So it's a old building built in 1906, right around when Regina itself was being built. About a 950-seat sanctuary, right in the heart of the downtown. It's been used as a performance venue quite a bit. Lots of classical music, the symphony, philharmonic, baroque, and chamber groups there, probably about 20 to 25 concerts a year. And then lots of practices, individual musicians rent spaces, and then groups that don't necessarily perform here hold rehearsals. In 2012, Knox Met went through a future planning process that they were able to do because of a fairly large bequest of land, which they tried to sell in the 90s when it was worth a couple $100,000, and then couldn't sell until the mid 2000s when it was worth a couple $1 million. So that has led them to try to revision space, repurpose space to figure out what a sustainable use of the building in will be. It needs lots of repairs and renovations just to continue to be safe and usable, but the size of the congregation doesn't really allow for it. So looking at models of sort of a community space that also houses a church is kind of what we're doing. My job was created as a second minister to come in 2014 to help with that process. And I'd say our challenges is one of funding and figuring out how to make a case for this place to be, to make a case to do the kind of renovations that would be necessary, but also inclusivity. The concerts have been managed by one individual within the church with a very kind of narrow focus and a difficulty to wrestle the vision away from maybe one really strong personality into something that that's connected to the mission and identity of the church and what the church is trying to do. I'd say, that's our current challenge.
Great. So so inclusivity, I've kind of framed as leadership because it seems connected with that, but both. both ands there. Thank you. And it seems like actually with yours, it was very similar to what Ian was talking about as well. So good conversation there already, potentially. Michelle?
Yes. Oh, I was off mute. Okay. My story is the same as Deborah's. We've just gone through an amalgamation, and we have some money in the bank that we'd like to use. And we've spent some time with Kendra, which has been really helpful at Trinity St. Paul's. And we love the work that Trinity St. Paul's is doing. And Kendra's really helped many of our team, our missional team, to focus in on combining our mission and worship with an arts type of multi-use sanctuary. So that's the direction that we're going in now. Our challenges aren't many right now because we're in the visioning process. I'm glad that Kendra and Trinity St. Paul's is having good challenges of too many people coming on and not enough administrative staff to take care of it. That's a good challenge. So right now our challenges are very small.
I'm really excited that there's already many of the stories seem to resonate with each other and understanding each other's where they're at. That's great. It's important. Thank you. Sandy? Yours is very different. I love it.
Yes, I'm in at Crescent Fort Rouge United in Winnipeg again. We, over the decades, we're a church that over the past 40 years, CBC had used for recording musical performances. We still have all of their plugins, etc., but they don't do that kind of thing anymore. So we have a very long history of music and theater within the church, in the sanctuary space, about 750 people there. We also have the back part of the church, or the fellowship hall, which was the original church. So we have a second floor space there, which used to be the original sanctuary and actually has sort of a second performance area in it, which has become quite interesting. So as with all other churches, as our numbers are declining, the space getting too big for us, the space needing repair and or renovation, and obviously with declining numbers and increasing costs, there's been financial pressures. About 5 years ago, Crescent Fort Rouge started to look at what could our future path be. And we actually worked with a representative from Edge National for a couple of years looking at the actual property. We're in what they call an urban village, which Winnipeggers sort of go, what's that? Nonetheless, that's what they call it. It's a densely packed area of both business and residents, which people in Toronto would probably say, well, yeah. But in Winnipeg, the majority of our population is in quite spread out and land-rich kind of suburban areas. So this would be the one area of the city that is not like the others. And we're there. And there are a number of other churches around us, including another United Church, which is about 5 blocks away. So we're in quite an interesting area. We are also in the 60s, we started an after-school and daycare program in the building, which has gone on to be its own third-party not-for-profit. I mention that for a particular reason, which I'll come back to. We are also, because of this densely packed area, we have land around us, brackets, green space. And as we went along, I mean, Edge National, in terms of what they were doing, their mandate is to look at the physical property, et cetera, and to try to determine, is there some kind of alternate use for that? And most of that, in fact, possibly all of it, I wasn't working on this initiative at the time, but most of that is dedicated to consideration of low-income housing of some sort. So the city deems that we're in an area where we could have more of that. However, a terribly interesting thing happened. We were approached by something called PAL, which is a partnership for arts something. Sorry, I can't remember what it is. They do low income for retired people from arts. So they want to build residences, low income co-op housing for people in the arts. So this kind of came to a moment in time at Crescent Fort Rouge where there was a proposition on the table with a very lengthy sort of lease agreement in that proposition. And the congregation unanimously said, no, we're not up for that. We don't want to relinquish what is sacred green space in the area to a building of that sort. They made a decision at that time to move forward with a different kind of mission orientation in which they said, whatever happens, happens. If we have to close and walk away, so be it. But we will not sacrifice this space to something like that. We will preserve it for the community. Okay, so based on many decades of choirs and theater using our space, the fact that there are children in the building, which was another consideration because anyone moving in and absorbing that amount of space was a threat to the daycare in the congregation's mind in terms of their playground, in terms of their safety, etc. And the daycare remains very important to the congregation. And we have a high number of seniors, obviously, in the congregation, but also in the geographic area who have low-income housing, but no activity. So the congregation made a decision to increase its activity in hospitality to the arts, supports to children, youth, and families, supports to seniors. So we had done a lot of consultation with these groups, and lo and behold, they all cross over into each other. We have arts groups who wish to provide community service to seniors and also to the children, including the beginning of a folk arts school, which would provide free musical instruction and instruments to the children, assisted by the seniors. And we have a lot of low-income children in the neighborhood. The daycare at the same time wants to increase communication programs, reading programs to the children, arts programs, music programs, and physical education programs. And following along what a lot of other daycares are doing, they wish to have seniors come in and deliver that. And we have seniors saying, we don't have anything meaningful to do. Don't invite us for coffee and donuts. Give us something meaningful to do, like reading to children or gardening with children or cooking for the children. So I just kind of went, well, look at that, a perfect Venn diagram. Let's go. And at the same time, I, as an artist, had the opportunity to be involved in an international project, and I had this idea that I would be able to do some photography in the sanctuary. And the minister at the time, Reverend Barb Janes, who wrote the book Inviting Wonder, which you might want to find and read because it was her sabbatical study of churches which have turned towards hospitality to the arts as their path forward. Anyhow, she said, well, why just stop at one thing? Let's do a big thing. And thus Art Fest was born. We are currently entering our 4th year, which continues to be a source of surprise to me as I was coming in the first year just for a particular project. The Arts Festival is a celebration of spirituality and arts. It runs between 5 and 7 weeks. It's beginning very shortly. So it sort of goes over the Easter period, if you will. And we, at our peak year, we had 2,500 of the public coming through for various events. We have been very fortunate to get lots of funding so we can offer honoraria to the artists and offer the events to the public for free. So all of these things are racing down a road together and overlapping each other and colliding with each other. We also, I'll just mention this and then mention the challenge, but we've had a theater move into that second floor space. They're called the Keep Theater. They're headed up by a Stratford actress who actually managed to get a Stratford grant to begin this theater in our church, etc., as well as Canada Council. Her name, the actress's name is Sharon Bajer. Writer, director, actress, and so they're now in the second floor of the space and have just had a very successful play run there. So our next challenge, to be honest with you, is, as many of you will recognize, governments don't like to give money to churches for any reason. So how do we find a means to coordinate this in a more professional and sustainable way and keep the ball rolling with all of these people? Right now, I'm not a paid employee. I just dedicate myself to, as well as many very active and growing committees, to moving this ball forward. So sustainability is our next challenge, as well as accessibility. We need an elevator to the second floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. So it sounds like the sustainability and the model behind this has been really raised up by 3 people. So I think that's going to be our first question probably that we pose to the group after we have 2 more introductions. John.
Thank you. We don't have, at Farallon Avenue Church, we're not doing a lot of arts programming yet, but we're moving that way. One of the issues that came up recently was our zoning, and we found out that we were zoned residential, which means that some of the activity, technically we shouldn't be doing anything but core church. And so we're reluctant to do anything too major that might draw attention to that. And that begs the question of the challenge of individually as a church going into City Hall and trying to get the rules changed, or maybe trying to change the rules across the entire city at once so that churches can be recognized as spaces. And Hamilton did that with some of their bylaws to make it a little more friendly to performances in churches. Also, the issue of sustainability is a big issue, and our focus is on income. The opportunity we have is that we're in what I would call an inner suburb, in that it's largely residential, high density, moving in all directions around us. But the zone that we're in is actually a bit of a wasteland for cultural activity. And that creates, and I've had some involvement in the past with the North York Arts Council, and I think there's great opportunity for activity, or to promote more cultural activity means how do we address the revenue, because our focus on the leaky bucket problem has been on trying to get more rental income. So part of the challenge there was a shift to thinking of rental as mission and not just a transaction or an income. And I think that is starting to shift the idea that if you have an autism group there, if you have a kids program, as we just heard, then these are actually mission fulfilling for us. And that is a shift in church. I'm also very interested in, if you've heard of Alan Roxburgh in his book, Joining God, Toronto Conference did a workshop with him in the fall, and is funding a 9-month project for a number of churches in Toronto area. I think Ian's part of that group too. And this is going out and finding God in the neighborhood, a listening project. And what I love about this will be starting in April, is that this is moving away from us creating a product like a Celtic Vespers or something, and selling it as versus going out and listening in the community and finding out what people want to do and are curious about. And that will be quite a shift for the way we have tended to look at things. We've been very business plan driven, and I think this will be much more organic process. We'll see where that leads. I think I'll stop there. Yeah.
No, and it's interesting because you're showing the other side of like the business plan and the sustainability side of like, okay, and then like balance that, like how much is mission versus like how do you do that? So thank you. And then we have Jim.
Okay, thanks. We've been moving in a very modest, step-by-step approach. In June 16, the congregation, after their own discerning, decided they want to see if there were other groups of the artistic, visual art and performance art and musical could see the use of, to develop a collaborative to provide, or to use our facility as a cultural arts center. And out of those discussions, we started to hold some events working together with different groups. And from that success, and we did receive some seed money from the United Church Foundation to start that out, just to hold some. From there, we decided on the objectives of the Arts Center, which is to provide a quality performance space and exhibition space, and to bring the best quality performers and musicians and so on they could. We're in Bradford. We're about 32,000 people, I think, right now. And the second thing is to nurture and provide low barrier opportunities to cultivate art and young artists and so on. From there, we then got some money from the county to develop a marketing plan. And by the way, the reason we were able to get that money wasn't because we're a church, because they wouldn't give any money to a church. But in this whole process, we were able to, a nonprofit organization in the area, the Bradford Fine Artists Society, the people who had been running it were very tired, and they were similar objectives to us. So essentially, we took over their nonprofit organization. We don't have just church people on it. We have some church people, but that's become the operating arm of the center in collaboration with the church. So the Bradford Fine Artists nonprofit, registered nonprofit, can actually apply government money that a church couldn't, and we've received some along those lines. We did some strategy and marketing to develop a subscription music concert subscription series this year. We're moderately successful in getting subscriptions, but our attendance is starting to grow. But what I found and what our board members found was the question of what is different about this art center. We're starting to be competing with other, because the town is starting to develop a full-blown strategy for the arts and culture in the area. So there's other people competing. There's people who don't want to do anything inside a church, and all those. And we were in the mix. And what is making us different than any of the other players? And out of that, and looking at what God is doing in the community, is and said, we saw a real need to develop an outreach through the arts to youth. We're calling it, it's just going to be kicking off in March, but it's a drop-in program where youth 14 plus can just come in. We're starting off at 1 day a week, and then in the summer, we're going to try it at 3 days a week, where youth can come, just hang out if they want to get involved in visual art or performance or music. We have artists that are providing the time to be able to do that with them, and then they end up cooking a meal together and so on. So we hope to create a space for them to explore the different visual art and performance art mediums, but at the same time start discovering their own opportunities. And specifically, lots of youth do get an opportunity to take dance lessons, art lessons, so on, but it costs their parents money. So we're making sure this is a low barrier entry. We hope that between the two of them, our objective is the Art Center, concerts, and so on eventually will become a social enterprise that will help or mainly fund the youth outreach. But it's, to me, the youth outreach in combination with building up the arts community, which will always be modest. We're a small church. We have beautiful quality sound, but it only can hold 200 people. And then we have some other space that we're renovating and so on. But we hope that the income generated through the concerts will, within a few years, more or less be feeding into expanding whatever the youth program. We call it strengthening youth and community through the arts. So our difficulty is we don't have any staff yet other than me, and I'm the minister there. And we're getting really pushed that way. So the sooner we can, our sustainability issue, we've received money from members of the community and so on, and we will receive some from the town to do some renovations. But our main is hopefully getting our operating budget up to the point where we can hire part-time people to run the thing, because the volunteer base is getting exhausted. Okay, that's it. Right
yeah,
now.
so volunteers, thank you. So the human resources behind this. So what I'm hearing is that there's actually kind of a continuum that's happening, right? And so at each stage of figuring out the Center for the Arts within a church, you have the first part of struggling with, is this actually what our vision and mission is as a church? And then the second stage of what's the business case, or what's our business model behind this to make sure it's financially sustainable? And then where TSP is at is like, okay, and actually I would say with Sandy as well, okay, it's working. Now there's lots of energy. Now we have to balance all this with our capacity. So kind of almost that progression. So what I'd love to propose is, let's ask the first question for those of us who are in stage one is, what the heck does art have to do with a church's mission? So for some of, not everyone has to answer this, but for those who like have really seen that and like known that just got started and this is clear for them, I'd love the insight for those who might be in that visioning stage right now of why this is the direction that you have taken.
I'll start this, and I think we've already done a lot of visional work as teams, and we're working with a consulting firm. Again, we've had so much help from Kendra. Thank you, Kendra. And one of the biggest things I just need to mention quickly is that we've learned from Kendra is that you can't keep relying on volunteers, and we've got to pay for staff to get this work done. Anyway, back to the mission message. We have already chosen to select our tenants and our renters to be mission appropriate. So they follow our mission. So we rent to like a circus company that give classes to kids and things like that. So all of our rentals are mission appropriate. So in our visioning, we are thinking we need to have residents that will be mission appropriate, that will use our sanctuary the same way. But there is that challenge where worship is very ingrained into people to be a very traditional thing, and it's sacred. So I guess one of our challenges has been saying that we can have a multi-use sanctuary, and we can do it in a respectful way, and follow our mission, and have residents that maybe they're not going to come on Sunday service, but they're going to be appropriate and they're going to be amazing. And also, again, Kendra, thank you. Partnerships seem to be paramount, and the partnerships that we create, these bridges that we create with these residents and tenants or whoever they may be, or just community organizations, whether they're using our facility or not, are so vital. That's just my brain dump there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else of why they got started on a Center for the Arts, or seeing how their church tied to the arts is so important?
Well, I'll jump in, and maybe I'll put my face on the screen too. So For us, the city of Hamilton's urgency around this mid-sized venue was primarily economic. Because there isn't a venue this size in the city, it's like a gap in the venue ladder, and so the ecosystem of the city for its musical venue infrastructure was plugged up. So we kind of had to absorb that rationale as we began to think about what we would be doing with them. And our working premise is that we're engaged in a social enterprise, so that the culture, the social and the economic, and because we're adapting a building, the environmental bottom lines of what we're doing are supportive of our spiritual bottom line, which is really the development of this cool and innovative and progressive new congregation in the urban core of Hamilton. So it's integrated sort of on that basis, and we don't ask too many questions beyond trying to keep all of those things working together, which really actually is a lot of fun, but a little stressful.
That's fair. I was actually very lucky to be at the first round table that Jim Keenan hosted at Bradford United Church. And I found it so interesting because one person, when they were asked, what does arts have to do with church? And he stood up and he said, Michelangelo once said to the Pope. And I was like, oh, right. That's the very beginning of the justification.
Could I add something here?
Yeah, please.
Thank you. So I think mission appropriate obviously is important, but there's what we've tried to do at Fairlawn is ensure that there's congregational engagement. So we're really, if we're going to do activities, whether they're social justice or cultural or any other kind of programming, we really want to see a connection to the congregation, because if we build deeper relationships in the congregation, we have that feeds the sustainability. Obviously, it feeds the slows down the leaky bucket. But so we've moved away from things where people approach us for checks only, and we ask ourselves, is there an opportunity to get people involved?
Can I also mention something? I know at Crescent Fort Rouge, we offer a lot of arts activities to the congregation directly. We also approach things with the perspective that we're here also to support the arts community and emerging artists. So while we do have very nice rental agreements with some, particularly the bigger, more professional choirs and groups like that, we also offer space to emerging artists for practice space or performance space. What we found with that is, for example, one of our people has offered space for largely young males under the age of majority, under the age of 18, to give concerts to their friends. So last year we had 47 of those bands and the youth in the church. So even though we don't think at Crescent Fort, we have a huge youth ministry, we actually sort of do through the arts. So and I was almost late for this call because we have two folk musicians who use our space to rehearse in, and they travel the world. They're just rehearsing for recording a second album, etc. And they bring people into the church also. So it's kind of like we have an investment, as well as the fact that we're mining some financial benefit from it. But the congregation will say, once we started the Arts Festival, it enlivened them. It's as if they had new life breathed into their very tired, dedicated beings, and they're all pumped and psyched and, you know, like, yeah, let's get that author in here. And they're bringing forward ideas, and they're very invested in doing this and attending these things. It seems to be something for their spirit, is what I'm trying to say. And it also helps us to welcome diversity into the church. We're very careful with our art show that we assist those with mental health challenges, with those struggling with language as an issue, et cetera, to be able to fully participate.
That's one.
Oh, yeah, go for it. Michelle?
I just said it's wonderful, Sandy. What you just said, it's all wonderful.
And Kendra, I saw you actually
Thanks.
going to chat. You want to jump in?
Sure. I mean, for Trinity St. Paul's, this decision was made long ago, and it's based on a number of things, not the least of which is all kinds of studies that indicate that accessibility is increased by the use of the arts. And so whether that's accessibility across language barriers or across disability barriers or through the autism spectrum or whatever, our ability to understand what is being conveyed is enhanced when the message is delivered visually and musically as well as verbally. And so I think it's just an opportunity to communicate in a different way on a broader bandwidth and a broader spectrum. But as I said in the sideline too, I mean, people are creative by nature. It is an expression of spirituality. And for many people, the ability to access their empathetic, connected selves that Christianity asks of them is enhanced by their connection with music and the arts. So I think it's kind of a no-brainer from our point of view.
I also kind of thought it was a no-brainer question, but I was laughing because I was like, I knew that the energy would come out from all of you because you are all doing this hard work because it's so important. So are you guys ready for the elephant in the room?
Sorry, can I just add one more story to your
Oh, for sure.
So we recently supported a project. One of the Syrian refugee newcomers was helping refugee children in Lebanon with art activities, and wanted to do something to help young people that are coming here as refugees in the last couple of years. And so we partnered with Art Heart, which is an art studio in Regent Park, a priority neighborhood, and we provided people from our congregation who are artists to do instructions. The studio gave it up their space and some volunteer support, and we have a dozen people taking art classes there. That art show will then be shown in April, and then it will be brought to our church. So there is clearly this is not only an art activity and a social activity, but a therapeutic purpose. And the guy that's leading it, Osama, is in fact trying to treat this as an entrepreneurial opportunity to see where he can build this. So that takes our refugee sponsorship to another level. We're very excited about that.
Thank you. Please, I don't want to shut off the conversation on this. So if anybody else wants to share, you're more than welcome to ask each other questions at any point in time. I might reestablish that. But I am going to bridge into the elephant in the room. We talked about financial sustainability and how I know a lot of us have been worried about what those business models could look like. But with all these people in the room, anyone have any ideas or any thoughts or any reflections on the financial sustainability of a Center for the Arts?
Sure. So Trinity St. Paul's has been on this for a long time, and this past year we'll have achieved, well, we did achieve full financial sustainability. So the operations of the building are now paid for, as are the capital, and we're returning surpluses back to the endowment on a plan that in 10 years we'll be back to where we were 15 years ago. So I think with the right partners and careful management and consciousness of the desire for missional and financial outcomes, it's perfectly possible for them to be financially sustainable. And certainly in the tour I came back from Philadelphia and New York, we're seeing lots of examples that can be financially sustainable.
Right. And so, and I hear you talking about partners, and I think we've had some elaboration on that. But Sandy, I always thought that Arts Fest was so fabulous because when Sandy first approached me, asking like, hey, is this a good fit with Embracing the Spirit? You had already bootstrapped it for 2 years, tremendously successful. I know that obviously the volunteer side of things, how do you actually get the human resources? But do you want to talk about bootstrapping to kind of the next level and maybe how that transition happens?
By that, you're sort of meaning piecing it together so that we can achieve some presence. Yeah, we started very small. We had about $1,000, and we thought we were like, whoa, $1,000 to get this going. Lots of it we used in the first year. We used for printing posters and marketing and all that kind of stuff. And then the next year, when it became obvious that the congregation would insist on us doing Arts Fest 2, I went looking further afield for grant money, and then we got, I think it was $2,500, which blew us away, and so that allowed us at that time to pay honoraria to the artists, very low honoraria, like $100 each to perform, and it also allowed us to increase our marketing and to increase the number of events. And what was happening was the word was out in Winnipeg that we were doing this. The word was out that we were a great partner for artists to come and perform. So we had some fairly professional artists approaching us for whatever reason, wishing to be involved. In fact, we were surprised in our external consultations that some of the choirs have actually stayed at Crescent Fort Rouge because of our philosophy, if you will, because of our social justice philosophy, which they feel aligns with their mission and philosophy. So those kind of attractions, even though we're not conscious of it all the time, those speak very loudly to certain types of partners who would like to join with you. So each time we're able to put together pieces of funding, and that's really what it took. I sort of went after what you would call more modest pieces of funding from multiple funding avenues and put together just enough to make the Arts Festival work, just enough. And as I said, we're paying modest honoraria, which we like to do out of respect for the artists, but lots into marketing, lots into, a modest investment in supplies for people. Again, with the idea that you're bringing people in to experience the arts and to have a spiritual experience in the arts without having to necessarily pay for that. So with the exception of one extremely large concert with professional musicians, we did not charge ticket price, yet we did put out a basket, donation if you're able. And we were surprised at the amount of money we got out of that also. And so we continue on in this fashion. And now we're quite well known in these few short years. We're quite well known in the city. Artists will say to us, oh, yes, we've heard of you. Yeah, I'd like to do something with you. And, can I do something for the kids or whatever? So it's building slowly, building upon the success, etc., and staying really tightly focused on the missional aspect.
And you got in the news quite a bit, and so I'm kind of bridging over because I know both. I think probably everyone on this phone has had their church in the news in some way, shape, or form. That seems to be best practice. But both Ian and Jim, I know you've used that quite strategically.
Yeah, I bombard the press. I have my list, and I bombard them with events, and I also tell them why they should be interested, just in case they can't glean that for themselves. I make it quite clear. They're always interested in visual. I had to put on one year twice fake art shows because the television cameras wanted, oh, could we see the art show? And I'd say, well, it's not for 5 weeks. Well, we'll come down and do a piece if we could see what it was like. So the whole crew moved in with easels and banners, and we created the fake show so they could come in and film. So yeah, that's been very helpful. Yes.
Yeah, no, I think so. And that even brought in some partners for you. I was hoping to open it up to everyone of, are there other secret, maybe best practices that maybe had, like I know that Jim, you actually had someone who was Catholic come by and give a donation because they liked what you were up to. Are there other secret things or best practices that maybe are helpful for financial sustainability?
Well, one thing I'd like to mention that we've been able to bring in for a small town, we're close to obviously to Toronto and so on, very, very high quality, up and coming people just starting off on their careers, mainly in classical, but also jazz and other musical genres. The way we've been able to attract them is because part of our mission is to develop these relationships with other people in the community. If they partner with us and share in the revenue, and we do charge for our concerts because we want it to become a social enterprise to feed more local nurture and so on, they don't have to pay insurance. They don't have to pay rent. They cost share. We develop a 50-50 split or whatever it may be. And that's going to attract us. And what it's given us are, people that are really going to do well in the music industry when they're first starting off and so on. They get a chance to start developing, their presence in the larger GTA community. So because if they rent the space from us to put on their own concert, they have to have insurance, they have to pay us a tidy sum for the rent and so on and so forth. So the cost sharing approach, and obviously if you get a resident group, with a number of churches, other churches, and I just going to do St. Paul's, you develop a very good contractual relationship with the resident group, and that's attractive to them, and you're providing that opportunity for them, but you're also getting revenue and getting good quality musicians at a low cost. Yeah.
No, and I think every event you've ever had, there's always press there as well. So.
Yeah, and to do that, you just have to cultivate the suckers. I mean, you can't get mad at them because they're rude or they don't return your call. You just continue to develop the relationship and provide whatever. And eventually, you do develop, who you can get. Unfortunately, in our town, we just lost one of our the newspaper that did a lot of our promotion. They got taken over, thrown, shut down. But we have one other, and the TV news has actually been quite good. Yeah, but you just have to keep at it and be nice to them and give them what they need. Find out what way they need their material. Yeah.
So at New Vision, we've done a couple of things to deal with some constraints that we have. So the major constraint that we have is that the fire department finds us to be not in compliance for use of the hall for assembly hall purposes, the use of the auditorium, the sanctuary, whatever you want to call it. And so while they're working with us on a case-by-case basis, like every concert or every event that we do, we have to have them write a letter to us approving our mitigation plan. We decided to employ some of these concepts that John Ryerson was talking about that Roxburgh has puts forward about going out and listening to your community by actually creating in our sanctuary space this space, which is not our space, but it's a space that we're inviting others to come in and join us, or us to join them with. So the best example of that to date is a Jazz Vespers initiative that we started, not by going out and finding some musicians ourselves and then saying, we'll guarantee you something. We said, to people in the jazz community, would you like to come and do a Jazz Vespers thing here? And, whatever gets collected, is yours. And, we'll work with you. So they jumped at it because it's a great space to play in, and a very beautiful time in the afternoon on a Sunday. And so that then has become kind of our sort of way of making this visible while we figure out how to deal with these compliance issues, because they're kind of cascading. If you decide to do the fire department stuff, then there's building code stuff that follows from that. Then there's audience and performers experience stuff. So it cascades. So this is just sort of where we're beginning. We were gifted with some pretty good press at the outset, because there is within this quite vibrant Hamilton music scene a real urgency around getting a hall of this size. So that was really good. But what we're doing in terms of reaching out is actually not going to the regular media, but kind of playing around with social media and putting Facebook ads out and Twitter, and just trying to make it be part of the social fabric of the Hamilton scene and let it develop.
I also find that you've been really good at creating like a champions list. So I know that I get updated on things all the time, but you've really facilitated like that core group of people who are going to be advocating on your behalf and keeping them updated.
Yeah, that's true.
I think Ian's reminder, though, is really apropos about what doors we want to open and being cautious about opening them, particularly on behalf of the United Church as a whole. So we run a faith property managers group here in Toronto who meets often, and one of those members is asking a lot of questions from the Charities Directorate about the charitable standing of United Churches and about taxation code. And I remind everyone that when you open a door, you're opening it for a lot of people, never mind just yourself. And with Ian, we're having a somewhat similar thing around the bathroom here right now, Ian, where we're remaking all of our bathrooms, but realizing that we're below code numbers, and will our historical standing carry us through or not, right?
Yeah. So
you want to be careful what doors you open in what order.
Yes, absolutely.
I just want to be cognizant that it is 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So I know we booked it technically for 2:30, but if you are leaving us early, I invite you to leave your email. Everyone who puts their email into the group chat, we will be sending that out to everyone who registered, so you guys can reconnect with each other. So please feel free to put that in the chat spot, as well as encouraging you to ask each other questions. So I saw that Cameron in the chat did ask a question to talk a little bit more about the governance and whether or not to have keep all of this work as a shared platform under the church, or do you have two separate organizations? And I saw that. Kendra, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So there's a ton of different models. The way Trinity St. Paul's works is a partially split governance structure, and that is not to access funding. That's just to speed up our ways of operating. And so separate from the trustees and the church board, we have a building management board that has equivalent power. So it's common in the United Church to have a property committee. This is not a property committee, it's a board. So once our budget is set for the year by the combination of all three boards, then we have the freedom to make decisions all the time, and freedom to write checks and to pay people, and oversight of all of the staff separate from M&P. And so that allows for some flexibility to meet the needs of our partners very quickly and to keep the place running. But there's more dramatic versions of this, both in Canada and internationally. So the Spire of Sydenham that I mentioned, we worked with them on a memorandum of understanding to split their governance to have a community board who in fact now has responsibility for their building. They don't own that building. The Sydenham United Church remains the owner of that building, but the Spire of Sydenham's community board has a great deal of power over the programming and the operations, and this has allowed them to access municipal funding because it can be seen that it's not entirely fully in the control of the faith community. Although interestingly, the faith community still maintains the majority share on that board. There's still 4 of 7. But there are other examples too in which people have devised entirely separate not-for-profits. it was Jim who was mentioning that this is how they're operating. They've adopted a separate not-for-profit whose purpose is art creation. And so by doing that, they can access funds through arts for that organization. Now, you have to be really careful to keep those really clean-lined and separate. But you can also do those things without splitting, right? So before any of this at Trinity St. Paul's, Taffel Music accessed millions of dollars in funding that upkept this building with memorandums of understanding that extended 5 years between Trinity St. Paul's and Taffel Music. And they accessed that funding from the arts side and put it into the building, and we just signed off on memorandums of understanding about what that gave them in the long term in terms of control of the building. And in fact, it gave them very little other than the right to continue doing what they were doing. So.
And you said, John, kind of, you went the other way on this. You had indicated in the chat.
Well, we had a neighborhood center that ran for 19 years, and they folded for a number of complex reasons. But the reality is that, as you know, through there's 80,000 charities in Canada, and we're just not trying to create more charities. There's really nothing that the separate organization could do that we can't do as a church. I think 20 years ago, we thought we had to have it separate. That we did church things and community stuff was somebody else. What we did lose though is we lost the programming staff, because they had programming people that actually created programs. And as I think it was Sandy that mentioned, it's how do you staff these things? So you can partner and invite, or like Ian, invite the jazz community in. It's one way to get around that. But it still lacks that kind of active programmer to build those bridges and make those connections. You can't add that to the existing staff of the church.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to continue to open it up for anyone else or anyone who's already spoken about any best practices that they're seeing and they really have on their heart that they want to share with this community, because we're all trying to do this great work. I know, Cameron, you were saying that you have like 20 to 25 events per year and how to continue to grow from there, and the leadership being a challenge, but love to even hear more about like how you have become that hub.
Yeah, I think, I think it became the hub that it is so far, likely through the efforts of the one person who kind of takes main ownership, who's our music director. And I mean, it's a very good version of what it is. It's probably, it's one of the things that we're best known for in the city. But it does create a little bit of a roadblock for further expansion. And it is a lot of personal connections. And so every once in a while, the personal connections and the things that we happen to have fallen into do align quite well with larger missional goals. But it's hard to, I guess one of our questions is then how to create a structure on top of that will help those parts that don't naturally align with where we're hoping to go in the future, to bring those two things together.
Yeah, so I can open it up. Any insight or maybe a story of what you've done in relation to where Cameron's at?
Just one thing that may be an indicator of direction in terms of a church mission and art center. The other day, the Presbyterian minister in the area called me, and they're getting a brand new honking huge organ. It's a really gigantic organ, and somebody donated it, and they're having the company that sold them is throwing in a freebie of a really good organist to kick off the use of it. And he was phoning me first to see if he could coordinate so it wouldn't interfere with any of our art center events. But then as we were talking, he said, could you also consider having some of the artists musicians that are playing at the Arts Center also will be appropriate to accompany him, their concert, their organ concert. So I'm thinking in terms of a general outreach to the larger community. That's quite striking, because many of the people, our friends in those two churches, in '88 we lost all our people with money to the Presbyterian Church in this community, and so it's interesting that he called. He wanted to collaborate with us in that endeavor and other endeavors where we can cross-fertilize in terms of the art. So it's just something that's starting to, and I've had that with a couple of other churches too. So it's just interesting. It's not just trying to replicate what we're doing, but to actually partner as they do things and we do things. So it's something that's starting to emerge. I'm not sure where it's going to lead or whether it won't lead anywhere. I don't know. Just throwing it out.
Thank you. The other main challenge that I know that Kendra had highlighted was, as the congregation continues to grow, how do you balance and manage the space between the various parties that are using the church, be it for art or for congregational use or for other. I'd love to hear a little bit more from Sandy, because it seems like you've done a lot of synergistic work between your partners, and or anyone who I've heard the phrase ministry of space. And how do you know that your space is your ministry, and how do you clear out when you need to for mission, or any other software or ways that you've managed this change management space? How do we manage it? Anyone have any insight on that?
Well, I reach back to some of the conceptual material on good partnerships, which is communication and transparency from day one. So we begin every sort of major agreement by talking about the need to periodically relinquish the space, and can people agree to that? So, for example, the theater group that's taken over the second floor, in essence, they have first dibs on it between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. And then other groups use it at night, etc. But they're the first to say, oh, we'll be out doing a play at another enterprise for 6 weeks so other people can use it. So we're looking for those conversations right up front. We've had a couple of sort of crossover things where when the play was running with the theater group, I had to phone the boys' choir, who typically are in there, the boys' choir, and said, okay, so your space is kind of full of chairs and lighting banks at the moment. And the boys' choir said, oh, well, we'll help to, so it ends up, when you have those conversations open and going on an ongoing basis, that they seem to just pitch in and help each other. Maybe it's just a Winnipeg thing, I don't know. But as I say, we start the relationship with those kinds of conversations about the need to be flexible. And if they can't be, then maybe they're not the right partner. And we have a great thing going right now where one of the choirs says, oh, we have some extra money. We're going to buy some risers. Can we store them at the church? And can we poll everyone else and see if they'd like to use the risers when we're not using them? So, it goes like that.
Jim, would you be comfortable in sharing your story of your board meeting where space was an issue?
Oh, yeah. It was, I think it's almost a metaphor for, on one hand, we've had real difficulties with some mainly older, not great, sort of the hobbyist artisans in the area that really don't like the church and have, really resisted engaging and have, gotten involved in being nasty and stuff like that. And we have that genre. I mean, that stream. On the other hand, the church, like many churches, what the heck has this got to do with the church? So in the middle of that, we were discussing this new ministry to young people through the arts, and everybody agreed it was a good thing, and we're working. But then we were looking at space, and we wanted to use the area until we've renovated. We have 1,200 square feet. We're renovating downstairs, which will give us a lot more flexibility. But in the meantime, for a hangout space for youth who just want to hang out, besides there's another large room they'd be doing art, or there's another place, concert area where they can do music. Was the old nursery, and it's a very good spot. It's visible, but it's there, and they can have their own spot. And that was okay, but then there was another artist. We have some seniors that also do art at the same time on that Thursday, which is fine. And they want to make sure they can always do it in this one particular room, and somebody in the board, but the choir always practices in there. And somebody said, well, why don't they practice where they perform or share in their music with worship in the sanctuary? Well, that's because it used to be too cold in there until we got a grand piano and keep it at a certain, yeah. But we've always met here. We've been meeting here for 40 years. And all of a sudden, everybody on the board or the council looked at each other and started laughing like crazy. So it was a good moment.
I love that story.
Of transformation. But that's so, those are things. The whole idea of what's it mean to be a disciple and to follow Jesus is so wrapped up in what it's like. I remember I come from originally from a Catholic background, and I was a Catholic priest. And the big debate in this one rural charge, before I got there, it more or less settled the modus vivendi, but was when in the late 70s, many people going to the United Church started to heaven tincture, or, the way the Anglicans and Catholics celebrate communion. And the great resistance in one church was, we've got to do it the way it says it's done in the Bible, which obviously was with the little cups and so on and so forth. So there's all that stuff, and you just have to work through it. But, and you got to take your time working through it, I guess. But anyway, yes, for 40 years they'd always used that room, and then they realized what they were saying. So it was good.
Thank you for that. So I will invite everyone again to put your email into the chat if you would like me to share it with everyone who's been on this conversation, because this hopefully is the beginning of the conversation. You're all doing amazing work in arts across the country, and I love how diverse it is across the country. And it's kind of neat that maybe you're at the same stage as someone else, or maybe you're resonating with something someone else is saying, and I would encourage you to follow up with them and connect with them directly. For all of you guys can definitely reach out to each other again. So I'm hoping this is the first of many conversations that you'll have individually as well. So as we sign out, I invite you to include your email in the chat. If you have a burning question that you really want to ask everyone here before we sign off, please throw it in the chat as I'm going to start doing our signing out. My last question really as we sign out is, what inspires you right now, and or like what is next? So you've done so much. There's lots of built up energy, and you see something in the next 3 to 5 years or 10 years. So I'd love you to share that as you're able or as you're willing to at this point, of what inspires you and like what's next. Anyone can speak. Love to hear it.
Well, we're still struggling with the viability question for the congregation, and also the capacity of the limited staff resources that we have, i.e., me, to make this thing go. So we see we see light at the end of the tunnel. We see a promised land. We hope that we get there. And I have to go. So thanks everybody, and I'll look forward to talking with you again.
I'll invite anyone else.
For me, what's next is bringing on the arts side. So I've been working with the Metcalf Foundation and Arts Build Ontario and Toronto Arts Council to start building the funding from the arts side. And so obviously there's a space deficit in the arts and there's space surplus in faith. And so we need to address that from both sides and find the granting sources from both sides to make those things come together in a way that's sustainable, also better for the world when we don't tear down old buildings and build new ones.
Yeah. And as people are noodling this round, thank you, Kendra. I noticed that John did put into the chat a question about insurance, copyright, type of music, and any resources on that would be helpful. Anyone else want to share what's next for them or what keeps them inspired?
Kendra inspires me. Thank you very much. What she just said was right on, and I love that my faith community, Leaside United Church, can breathe for another year or 2 or 3 or 10 by creating an arts center, and that's important to me and to my family. What our next steps are right now is we're doing town halls, and we're talking about some of the blue sky workshops we've been working on with the congregation, and we're going to finish it up in a couple of weeks with a feedback session where we can get all the feedback from the congregation so that everybody feels like they're part of this process, and hopefully go forward with a good detailed strategy. YouTube and Instagram.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Anyone else who wants to share what's on their hearts, what's moving forward for them?
Well, I think what always inspires me is the people in the congregation who come up to me and say, you know what, I've started painting again, or you know what, we did this poetry session and I just love it, so I'm going to keep writing. Or the little kid that comes up and says, you know, what's the theme for the art show? I want to start my painting, you know. So seeing those people enlivened by all of this is what keeps me at it.
I'd like to say something. I'm from Knox Met in Regina, and our building is one of those large United Church structures in the center of downtown, and we say that it's our biggest liability and our biggest asset. It's become very well known as a performance space, as Cameron has already described. And so it has many community people in it. And whereas we're just at the beginning stages of trying to formalize very good connections in deliberate ways, it seems to me that we need to make ourselves so indispensable to the community as well, that they will not allow us to fail. So to inspire the community to be part of our endeavor and our mission in whatever ways that feed them as well. So that's what I would like to suggest, that my hope is that the community sees us as a valuable space and that we support them in doing what they're doing as well.
Thank you. Thank you. And sorry, I saw the 306 and we didn't have you introduce yourself. So thank you.
Thank you. I came a bit late.
All good. All good. Anyone else want to share before we sign off?
Thanks for this.
Yeah, thanks.
No, thank you. So, I mean, for me, I get inspired by all of you. I always say to people that I have the best job and probably the easiest, for all the work that you're doing is the hard work. So thank you. And so we have recorded this, and I'm going to